Good afternoon, as well as good evening and good morning, and a very warm welcome on behalf of ISA to all of you who dedicated part of your time for our webinar today. It seems I had already my warm-up introduction in the part of the webinar that I've been on mute, so now I had a very good kickoff. We are very glad to see such a large participation, and we hope that the discussion today will provide you with useful insights and reflections regarding the early childhood educators and the ways of supporting their professionalism, not only during, but also after this very challenging period that we are all witnessing, created by the COVID-19 pandemic. I am Mihaela Ionescu, Program Director in ISA, the International Step-by-Step Association. For those of you who do not know us, ISA is a membership association powered by close to 100 organizations working in the early childhood field, primarily in Europe and Central Asia, and our work revolves primarily around quality, equity, and high-quality workforce in the early childhood services. Now I'm very honored to introduce you the three experts that accepted our invitation today, representing three member organizations in our network. First, Sanja Brajkovic, Director of Open Academy Step by Step Croatia. Sanja is a psychologist and worked in Open Academy Step by Step since 2003. Her work and the organization's work is aimed at improving quality of work in education institutions and providing support to children from vulnerable groups. She has a particular interest in professional learning communities and in education for social justice. Thank you, Sanja. Simon has worked, and we are very glad to have a man in our webinar, has worked in childcare since 1999. He started as an educator, then manager of different childcare locations, and he worked as a pedagogue since 2008. He's a board member of Childcare International and representing Childcare Kinderdam from Rotterdam. He trains educators, advises management in childcare, and works together with local and national policymakers to influence policy. He recently also started his PhD at Leiden University. And last but not least, Gerda Sula, who's the director of the Step by Step Center in Albania. Gerda has been working in applying child-centered methodologies since 1995. And the Step by Step NGO, which she leads, is considered a go-to place on issues of research, policies, and practices in early childhood education in Albania. She also teaches at the University of Tirana pedagogical approaches to future teachers. Well, before moving forward, we want to remind you that you can share your questions in the questions section in the panel on the right side of your screen, and also comments if you have such. And we plan to have a short session of questions and answers in the last part of the webinar. We also would like to let you know that the webinar is recorded, which means that the recording will be made available to all participants, so that if you choose to share them with your network, we would be very happy. And now let's have a brief overview of the topics that we plan to cover during our discussion. First, there will be a very short introduction of what is happening now. We will stress some points regarding the shift we are witnessing today in the early childhood education, and what are the big risks, but also some possible positive changes, which we might consider in the future, not only for today. We will have then our colleagues share some examples of how early childhood educators' professionalism has been supported in their countries, what are the gaps in supporting the early childhood educators and what needs to be in place, but also what and how much can early childhood educators do to support equity and inclusion in early childhood education services. And instead of conclusions, we will also share our reflections around what should be safeguarded today regarding early education specifically. What are the big risks? Because it's a very hectic period and lots of things are happening, but still there needs to be a lot of reflection of what are the big risks, what are the dangers, as well as what should be preserved from what is happening today in the early childhood education and care field, and what will still be precious tomorrow. These are ideas that we have shared in our discussions before organizing the webinar today, and we would very much like to share them with you. Well, let's start by saying that we are actually witnessing a kind of a forced paradigm shift. We did not ask for it and we did not plan it. We have moved from in-person interaction to interaction at distance and primarily online, as we are doing even now. But in the case of early childhood education, the shift, I think, is more challenging than ever. And educators have never been prepared to operate in such conditions, which are to be considered unnatural for the early years services. We also believe there are no quick fix solutions for this shift. But what we can provide now, it has been, and it is still, an immediate support that to cope with the situation. We also have learned from what's happening in the struggle that the educators are having to provide their professional, to fulfill their professional role, is that home environments cannot replace the early childhood education and care settings, not daycare, not kindergartens. Homes are homes, and parents cannot transform overnight in early childhood professionals. But what they can become, if they have not been until now, the strongest allies of the educators. And another reflection in what's happening today is that even if we are witnessing this paradigm shift, moving from in-person to online and trying to fulfill still our roles in different capacities in the early childhood education and care system, is that the very specific nature of learning in the early years and of development in the early years has not changed. It's the same, and that's something that we should always keep in the sight in all the decisions that we are making as professionals in the field. Well, with these thoughts that we wanted to kick our discussion, we have asked ourselves, and we would like to learn a lot in all this very entropic period, I may say, when all countries have been many countries have been in lockdown and with the services closed. Early childhood educators found themselves really striving to fulfill their professional roles, not being at all prepared and even thinking of how could a service operate in such conditions. And there is very little infrastructure to function in these conditions, and there's not enough guidance on how to navigate through this context. But we do know that there are, and we learn every day about examples. So in many countries, a wealth of examples in many countries on how we can further strengthen how we can further strengthen our support to them, and also how we can learn more from their experiences. For this reason, we invited our colleagues today, and now I will give the floor to them. And I will start with Sanja from Croatia. Sanja, you lead an organization that has always been so much focused on nurturing the professionalism of early childhood educators and teachers also in primary school. What has been your organization's immediate reaction, and then how you have organized yourselves in providing support? Because you do have a strong community of professionals that you have been following for a long time, but now you have to follow and support them from distance.
Thank you for your introduction also, Mihaela. So I think that the first reaction was a shock, which was, I think, for most of people and most of professionals. So in Croatia, all educational institutions are closed from March 16. And at that time, it was actually decided that for primary school and for secondary school, children are going to distance learning through the television, and also some online learning, which was supported and which is supported through their teachers. And the Ministry of Science and Education organized actually distance learning. At the same time, there was no any recommendations from the Ministry of Science and Education should actually kindergartens and preschool educators continue to provide any kind of support or help to parents and families in these difficult situations. Also, you probably know, and it is in most countries and also in Croatia, that local government is actually taking care about kindergartens and preschool institutions. Some of local governments give some kind of instructions, but it was mostly instructions regarding the health and hygiene and so on, because kindergartens are open just for those children who are living in families in which both parents are working and there are no other child care options. So it is clear that actually kindergartens is open just for the purpose of child care. So
maybe we should move to the next slide. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So there was no recommendations, but it was clear that after, I think, few days, kindergarten teachers and educators feel urged to react and feel urged actually to use their profession, their knowledge and skills to support parents who stay at home with their children. And the role of all of us actually changed, as you know, and you said, and also the role of Open Academy step by step changed a lot, because in the previous time before Corona, we had the perception that we are those who are actually doing some kind of initiatives, and we present our initiatives to the teachers or to the educators or educating to the institutions. But this is actually the situations in which they are initiate new activities, and actually they are providing and they are very creative in providing some kind of activities for families and children. So we thought actually that in that kind of situation, which was very stressful, and I think still is, but maybe another kind of stress, is that actually we would like to support them on the human basis, and to support interactions between educators, and actually to give them opportunity to talk to each other and to share their understanding of the situation and their role also in that kind of situation. And as we talked, actually we organized two things. Is that
maybe we should move to the next slide.
We can move to the next slide. On several occasions, we organize online support for groups for kindergarten teachers. First, it was a group of our step-by-step educators. They are trainers for different kind of educations, and we organize actually some kind of what we called coffee break for them, and it was just a talk about life and about situation in which all of us are living. But of course, that after first few sentences, we start to talk about the job and about our profession. Also, it was opportunity for our kindergarten teachers and educators to use some online platforms, which was new for them. And our idea was that actually by using the platform, they will create new ideas how they can use it also in their work and supporting the families and children. And that actually happened, because after that, lots of them, for example, start to have conversations with parents or even some meetings with children online, and support them in a way that actually they start really to interact with children again. Yes. And the second idea and the second initiative, it is an initiative which is connected with our magazine. So since Open Academy step by step is we are editing and publishing the magazine A Child Kindergarten Family for more than 20 years now, and it is published four times a year. We thought that it will be that magazine can be a good floor for sharing the ideas and experiences between teachers, what kind of support they give to families and children, and how they understand the situation.
Sanya, the magazine is online. It has been all the time online, or
this issue is online. So we had the idea that actually we will develop one issue which will be completely online, because the others is just one article is online, but this one is the whole issue. And what is very interesting is actually that the idea realized in just few days, because at Friday I called the editor Bojana Gotlin, and I told her that I think it is a good idea actually to publish that kind of magazine, and that it should be online and it should be free. And she shouted something like, yes, we will do it. And we start to call different professionals and different kindergarten teachers for whom we already know that they are doing a lot on their practice. And the idea just spread through the professionals. And so at Monday, we had more than 20 articles and more than 50 pages. So this is actually double issue, since we usually have 32 pages of that magazine. And I think that I saw yesterday that it was seen more than 16,000 times by now in just 1 or 2 weeks, something like 10 days actually now. So the idea actually was to share just what we are doing in the kindergartens. And now I will present just some of articles, and as you said, it can be found on our internet page or our Facebook page as well. So you can go on. Yeah. So what kindergarten teachers are doing in Croatia, and kindergarten educators, not all of them are teachers, and about what we are really proud of them. So this is their work, and we are actually giving them opportunity to share what they are doing, and we are happy, very happy because of that. So the first article you can see here is talking about the role of parents while their children are stayed at home for the whole day. And since we are offering them some kind of support and maybe suggesting some kind of activities, does it really mean that they are also teachers? And the author, she is a psychologist, she's talking about critically about changing the roles, and should we change our roles? And she's very clear about that parents are still parents and they are not teachers, even we are suggesting some activities for them. Yes. The next article, she is the previous one, I'm sorry, is the Eda Tomljanovic. Actually, she's talking about assessment, some kind of assessment of children, because she shared the educational plans for all children. She sent to parents emails with the strengths, what she thinks are the strengths of their children, and how they can build at home on that strengths. Then also the next one we can see now. Yes. Esmina Skopjak, she is a preschool teacher, and she's organizing once or 2 times a week a virtual afternoon circle meetings with children. It's very fun. They love to talk very much, and they are talking also about what is new at their homes, because she wanted actually to give them opportunity to stay in touch between their friendships and with other children. Then we have Monika Kamenic. She's a preschool teacher, but also she is working at our early childhood play hub, which is organized in one village in Međimurje. and she's since Play Hub now it's closed. She's organizing a small video activities for children, which are very funny, and she showed them how they can work on some kind of activities, or actually they can build some toys and plays by themselves, and with help of their parents. And it is also free and online. And we can now see the next one. Yes. So this is one Duda. She's also our friend, and she's a preschool teacher. What she actually thought it is maybe the good way and the good moment to share with parents and children some theater plays, which was videotaped by and made and videotaped by preschool teachers before few years. So now they again put them on their website, kindergarten website, so families and especially children can repeat to watch those theater plays over and over again. And very interesting, the last one, I think, this is also one preschool teacher who at home also has a child which is 18 months old, and she knows how it is difficult to have a child that age at home for the whole day. So she is actually proposing some kind of physical activities for children and their parents, which can be very good for children from 0 to 3 years old. She also made the pictures so parents can see what they can do with their small children at home. So these are just some of examples of articles we publish in that magazine for now.
Thank you so much, Sanya. I think besides of the huge diversity of examples that you have shared with us, two ideas I might say that remain powerful. The empowerment of professionals to share their experience, their expertise actually in working with children and families. Not many spaces are provided, let's say, for them to showcase their expertise, and how valuable it is when kind of disseminates, a lot of other professionals, and they co-construct the knowledge about how to cope with this situation today. The second one is that, sorry, yes?
Yes, I think that what is interesting is the question, if there is no kindergarten as a place, as a building, are we still early childhood professionals?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the educators conclude that they are. And if there is no kindergarten, they are still there for children.
But they need to find spaces where they can affirm their professionalism. And I think that the examples you've provided, the magazine, which has been also previously a powerful tool for connecting professionals and building this kind of community of professionals, now I think you can look at how it elevates the role that it has in bringing even more forward their professionalism, and also their struggles, the questions that they are asking themselves, and the reflections they are having, but also their creativity and how they can so-called recycle what they already know how to do very well into the new environment, which is home-based, while keeping the balance into not overburdening the roles of the parents. Just because I'm looking at the time, not that I would not want to continue more of the discussion, I think we are going to move to Simon. And we have seen now very good examples, powerful examples of what educators are doing. But I think that there are other, let's say, professional figures in the system that are very important. And I would very much like to let you talk a little bit more about it, before giving us a bit of introduction about what has happened in Netherlands until now.
Thank you, Marina. Actually, it is quite similar to what we hear is going on in Croatia, but what we've seen is that from the 16th of March, childcare services have closed mostly for most people, just as schools, colleges, universities all over. They have stayed available, childcare, for people with the essential jobs, as is defined by the government. But people who do not have these essential jobs have been urged to work from home as much as possible, and Like one of the educators Sonia just talked about, I'm one of the parents actually currently having 4 children at home and trying to do my job. So that's quite of a big of a challenge as we speak. So we're trying to look from the professional side how to be able to help people, parents, and educators as much as possible. The government and municipalities have collaborated on measures regarding childcare services that have provided some guidelines, but they're quite general. So to really make them specific enough for us to actually be able to focus on what can we do instead of what can't we do in this moment in time. We have had to take some measures in our own hands, and that's on the next slide. So what I would like to speak about is the role that the management can take and the pedagogical coaches. I'll come back on that later. But if we look at the management, what they've actually been doing since the very first moment is they've started with weekly updates, and they speak directly to the managers, and the managers provide the educators with the information as well. What it actually does is take the big amount of uncertainty concerning this whole situation and trying to give people guidelines into what can we do, how can we do it. If you've got some great ideas, how can you let us know? Because all the beautiful examples from Croatia, we've recognized that in the Netherlands as well, that carers, educators actually are full of enthusiasm and they haven't given up on their job. What they're trying to do, how can we manage it from this strange time? So the weekly updates have actually helped them. What's really helped as well, and this is a small example you see here put in this slide, is actually a letter that the same slide. So go back one more. Yeah, thank you. This is a letter from our director, directed to all the personnel, all the staff. And Dutch phrase here is, we can only do it if we do it together. So let's stay together and stay social. It's only physical distancing at this moment in time and not social distancing. We don't use that word at all. And it really helps if our director speaks to all the staff, all the 800 of our staff members directly through this letter. And it's a really good mix of giving information, but also having the soft touch and letting her know that she appreciates everything we've been doing. So that's really great. The other thing the management is doing is actually adapting the guidelines we already had to the new situation. If we look at the different guidelines for emergency childcare, there's children from parents with crucial, essential jobs that haven't been with us at all, and they start coming by tomorrow. How do you welcome these children? How do you safeguard their well-being? How do we get to know the parents? What routines are children accustomed to, and what is really important for us to take over as well? So those type of guidelines have been adapted accordingly. So that's really great. And now the next slide, please. What we see here is that in the Netherlands, it's not just in Rotterdam and Kinderdam, but also through all the Netherlands, it's mandatory for every organization to have a pedagogical coach, someone who actually has the main goal of their job is to translate the policy to the pedagogical approach for all educators. That's quite difficult now because, of course, they aren't able to go to the groups themselves, go to the locations. But what they have been doing from their homes is what is the main focus we have to have now, and it's focused on well-being and involvement of children. How can we do that from a distance is actually the main example that they're trying to set. Now they have specific pedagogical guidelines. They have been writing from the moment we've known there was a lockdown until we're knowing it's going to open up from May 15th, 11th, is how can we welcome children back? Because everybody's going to start all over again, and we're going to do it all at once. So it's going to be massive impact on well-being on children and on educators and parents as well, to be honest. So the pedagogical coaches are actually thinking about this, reflecting on this for the last couple of weeks, and they've come up with a good plan that they've sent to all the managers and all the educators if you're looking at the well-being and the involvement of children, think of this. Start off, take it easy, don't get yourself worked up too much. Take a good look at the children and start from there. That also ensues an observational format that's been adapted as well. It's not the same as in the beginning. We're trying to scan the well-being of all children coming into our daycare centres and after-school care at once. Within a week, we want to have a quick overview. How is everybody feeling, and what does that ask from us and from parents? And what you see here in this same slide now is the welcome back. It's just about 2 or 3 pages with suggestions. Look out for this, watch that, and it's really focusing. Don't get too caught up in all the educational programs at once. Pick it up slowly. See where we have to start first, and this is the well-being. Checking that first.
I think also, Simon, that you because here you have talked a lot about also kind of those that are still attending the services for children that are having parents with essential jobs. But I think that the pedagogical coaches also do play a role also in for those families that stay at home with their children and children that are still not benefiting of services. Maybe
yeah, definitely.
The next slide.
Yeah, so this actually is because there are children that are benefiting from the care, and it is important to notice as well that does involve children from families who we have identified as a little bit more vulnerable. So we have tried to keep the childcare open for them as well, because it is a little bit more hard for these families and parents to take care of children if they are a little bit more vulnerable. But for all the other parents, about 85–90%, I think, of the parents that are not able to come to our childcare facility at the moment, we've had this twice a week. The pedagogical coaches have made a letter, inspirational letter for fun activities to do at home for the whole family, because they just don't focus on the little ones or on the older children. And now let's try and involve the whole family in this. And that's what you see on this slide here. We've done it in Dutch and in English for parents to reach as much parents as possible. And we've done this from March 16th until now, twice a week. We've sent them a letter. It's about 5 activities per week, and we try to stress it's not something you have to do. You don't even have to let us know how it went. It's just to help parents relax a bit. And this example of an activity is how to cook together with young children. The fun part is that actually I tried about 85% of these activities. I tried them at home with my own kids. And so we started off by cooking together. Don't start at 5:30. Start at 4:30. Let the young ones about 3 years old start cutting the mushrooms with a dull knife. But let the older children read the recipe and let them do it. Let them coordinate it. This can be a real fun activity if you take a little bit more time. And it says something about the mindset that's really important for parents at home. Try not to rush it. Try to enjoy it, this very special time, to build some more quality time with the children. You're there anyway, so if you're there, focus on the kids, and then after that, they will see they start playing by themselves a little bit more. So finally, what we've done as well is we've adapted our training for staff to a more online version of training. It can't replicate the goal we have with the training from live interaction. That's not what pedagogy is all about, I think. But it is really nice to complement training, and it is a way to now develop a new way of training as well, complementary to what we used to do.
Thank you so much, Simon. I think it was very useful to bring in the bigger picture. Also, as I said, other professional roles which who could play a very important role in supporting the educators, because they're not alone. They should not be alone. And we have heard on how Sania, with her organization, whom are the nurturers of professionalism, by creating all the platforms and allowing or empowering the professionals to share their expertise, from managers of centers and pedagogical coaches. And now let's move to Albania. Gerda, I mean, I suppose that many of the things have been very similar in Albania too.
But absolutely.
Yes, and let's hear, because I think it's very important to see as a movement in the field where we are, what is happening, what are we doing, what are our reflections on what's happening, and how we can do better, how we can become better at what we are doing without necessarily changing totally, but only that parts that are absolutely impossible to do while being at distance.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. The situation is very much similar. We started locking down from day one. Everything was from patient one, patient zero. Everything was locked down. I don't think any other country was so drastic. So we had no time to prepare for migrating online, and we had to learn as we were doing. And I see three phases how this happened. The first week, it was really wonderful for the children to be at home with their parents, and the parents could not go anywhere but be with the kids. So we right away started to offer suggestions and solutions to parents through their teachers on how to manage the fear and the anxiety, because there's the loss of predictability, sorry, of what was going to happen. We encourage the teachers and the parents to talk about when we are going out, when we are this situation will finish, instead of if, and because that creates a higher level of anxiety, especially to young children. We trained the teachers, we reminded them that children and adults are different, and children manage stress differently than adults. And lack of mobility is really a huge issue to children. So we proposed all sorts of fun activities, even some short videos. Sometimes we found them already made by other parents. Sometimes our parents made videos with their children and shared them in closed structures. And if we can go to the next page, please. This a lack of social connection between the children, which is so vital in that age group. Teachers right away started to use WhatsApp, because that was the social media that they were used to, most of them at least. And so they created groups with the parents, and then we offered training step by step to go to more structured opportunities such as Zoom or even Google Classroom if they wanted to share bigger pieces of information with the parents mostly. This lack of social connection was somehow replaced with Zoom meetings of the children in the presence of their parents and with the teacher present. Of course, there were lots of discussions. Is Zoom safe? Because of all the safety issues privacy issues that were being discussed. But then we decided that we need to choose the lesser, the smallest danger risk, and it was much more dangerous for the kids not to see their friends and their teachers than to have some other. So we trained the teachers how to use password protected Zoom activities instead of keeping it open. One of the things that was happening during this time was the loss of sense of time and loss of sense of purpose. Why do I have to get up in the morning? So we stressed with the teachers and with the parents the importance of establish a routine, but that was flexible enough for the kids to have the time to do what other activities, and stressing the less is more. This danger of schoolification that I have written down, that was really very problematic. It's problematic the whole time because we have this pre-reading and pre-writing requisites that are being so strongly pushed on to preschool teachers that sometimes the teachers are just focusing so much on cognitive development rather than the holistic development of the child. In this case, we stress the importance of less is more, and then it's important to do fewer things, but that were more involving of the children. One challenge that we are still facing, and I think it's going to be a major issue, is the danger of differentiation due to economic situation. It's again the situation of blaming the victim, that children who are in poor conditions, economic conditions, don't have access to that. And we will talk of how we try to deal with that, but that's something that we will discuss when we talk about the gaps, that this is a major, major issue that we haven't really managed to structure. If we can go to the next slide, please. So, yeah, the activities that I already mentioned were very much focused on making sure that there is a meaning to what we were doing, that the parents are enjoying, should have the chance to enjoy being with their children. This is a gift. That's why it's called the present, and that they need to. It would be great if they could see it in that viewpoint. So we stress these kind of positive messages to the parents and push them to see the positive side rather than to focus very much on data, on graphs. Everybody has become a data analyst these days, and the kids don't have that kind of access to the information. So the important thing is to see it as a unique opportunity to really become a better parents to their children. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerda. I think one highlight I would say from everything that you presented, which was very aligned with what we have heard previously, it's the contribution of parents. I think another valuable thing that is happening is the peer learning across parents' communities. I think that they're willing to share, they are willing to inspire each other, they're willing to support each other, and I think that's something that perhaps was not happening that much previously, or it was, but not to the extent that now is happening. And I think that creating this larger community that with parents together with the educators is something that I don't think that it has happened to the extent that it's happening today, provided the online environment that allows that perhaps easier than in person. Yes, I'm mindful again of the time, and I would suggest, yes, to go to the next slide and discuss a little bit. I will let you come with your suggestions in this case, by knowing very well the context in your country. Well, we are talking about supporting educators, and we have heard about ways of supporting them, but we definitely know that there are some gaps, and there are some things that we know that would need to be in place so that they feel better in performing their role as professionals. Because as Sanya was mentioning, they want to be recognized. I mean, they don't give up. They are so determined, even more perhaps now, to show that they know what they are doing and that they can do it. But however, there needs to be means for this powerful resource to be expressed. And I'm wondering, and I'm addressing this question to you, where do we see that there are gaps in supporting them, and what would need to be in place? Who would like to start first? I would suggest to move to the next slide. Simon, please.
I think it's really important to acknowledge, and that's what our educators say as well, that there are online training is booming now, and you see it all over. But to realize that online digital training and interaction is not the same, and therefore cannot replace live interaction. That's what we say with children among each other. How hard is it for them to keep 1.5 meters distance? It feels unnatural for our educators and our staff actually to do it as well. But I think it's really, really important that we acknowledge it can be complementary to other training and other interaction, but it cannot and must not replace it if you look at what's really important for children and social interaction in general.
Anybody else who would like to add to? Yes, Tanya.
For us, I think two things is one, what Simon mentioned is the fact that actually we are going back to kindergartens and schools, maybe in Croatia, maybe even next week. So now it is obviously that it is not clear how we will do it, and also it is not it seems that it is a medical decision, and it is economical decision, and not a decision which is made by the professionals who are working with children and who are thinking the mostly about well-being of children and their families. And I think what we maybe should do, who are working with educators, that put them on the right place to be actually those who we are going to ask, okay, we have some conclusions that maybe we can go on, but in what kind of situations and how it will, that kind of situation in which we are going actually affect on children and their families. So I think that is maybe never like now. What we have to do is actually to interact and to have interchange what different kind of professionals think about this situation when we are going back to some kind of normal life. And what also we think and what we saw, since in Croatia there is between 65 and 70% enrollment of children in kindergarten, and it is rather low in the European Union. We know now that actually those children who were not included in preschool program 1 year before primary school now left behind, and we are thinking very focusedly now what to do with those children who even didn't approach to go to the kindergarten, and can we provide something for them as well, because they haven't been in touch with kindergarten staff at all.
Yeah, yes, and if I can add into that, I'm sorry, Mihaela.
Go ahead.
We have this need for structuring what we're producing. It has been a period of incredible creativity from the side of the parents, of the teachers, most definitely. And teachers are doing things that they would never have thought they would do. We had a resistance on technology when we tried to offer training on technology previously, because I'm an early childhood educator, no screen time for the kids. I should limit the screen time for myself as well. So they were just resisting it. And now they are using it, and they have understood how much they can learn, and this capacity to observe and do new things. And the model that we are using is that difficult is easy, pardon me. What's easy is the difficult thing with which we are used to. And so they are just trying to understand, we are trying to reflect on how can we collect all this wealth in order to keep what's useful for the future and for making the educators feel good about themselves. And one gap that has been a major issue to us is the low focus on the professionals. Professionals have been requested to just give, and this is all in all the serving professions, the health sector, social sector, and of course in education. But there was little time focused on the teacher themselves, and to find time for them to be kind to themselves. They had to pivot online all of a sudden, and at the same time they had to manage a family and all the tasks and responsibilities that have been very difficult. This is something that we are still struggling. I think it's going to be something that we need to keep on thinking. One idea that one teacher has started is a yoga class. They have a yoga meeting every afternoon at 6 for the teachers, and it's very difficult to be structured in a chaotic and high pressure environment, and sometimes the work can be very monotonous. The need for some air, that is something that hasn't been structured still is a gap, and it's something that we still need to think of.
And I also suppose that yes, please go ahead, Simon.
If I can just react to that as well, Gerda, and I think that's wonderful, because the talks we had together with each other before this webinar is that you actually see is that there is a lot of positive initiatives coming throughout the innovative thoughts of early childcare and education institutions between different countries as well. So I would really love to early childhood and education to make a stand and to actually fill in the gaps that we've recognized now, and they're probably a little bit more than this, but use the positive vision initiatives and the creativity that our educators and staff actually really possess, and how can we try and influence policy on this matter and just embrace this moment and make a stand.
Thank you very much, Simon. I think this is also one of the thoughts that we had when putting up this webinar, to kind of reflect together and also distill a bit all the thinking that happens nowadays on how these things should influence to a certain extent our thinking around policies in early childhood education and care. And I would move now to the next topic that we propose for today, and it's linked to what we have already started discussing. Is what and how much actually can the early childhood educators do to support equity and inclusion? And I know that there are different examples in many countries. I know that they are the ones who actually know very well who are the families who are having tremendous problems and that they find themselves in a very difficult situation, together with other professionals that are working in the early childhood system, be them social workers, social assistants, or nurses. But they are also the ones that have known before this crisis who are the families that do have a lot of problems, and they were all the time trying to reach out to them. I think now for them as professionals, it's even harder perhaps to do it. And it's a lot of pressure that is put on by themselves, first of all, on how to reach out to them and what stays in their power to do, so that they do not abandon those children and those families. And I think we are talking here about those that are living in extreme poverty, those that are marginalized, have been traditionally, let's say, however it sounds less, marginalized or excluded, children that are belonging to minorities, or refugee children with disabilities, where the educators know about all these children, and they know how difficult it must be for them. So just some examples. We are going to dedicate another webinar specifically on this topic, but I think that we could have not talked about educators without referring to this, because they are quite aware of the big problems that exist out there in the families, and they need to do something. Also, they feel the urge to do something. But how much they can do alone, that's another question. And to what extent is their contribution possible to be done with the infrastructure or lack of infrastructure that exists in the most holistic or comprehensive way around these families. So I will give now the floor perhaps to Gerda. Let's hear.
Yes, so if we can switch slightly, the idea of having these children being somehow forgotten and to the side. Just one data that to me was very hurtful. We are a small country, less than 3 million, and yet there are 153,000 families with no internet connection. So there are all these wealth of information that are being spread to the ones that, of course, they do need it, but the ones that need it the most cannot access it. So one thing that we started was these, we didn't start it, these were continuous, but the focus of these weekly radio shows was now on parenting during COVID-19, and so we call them children of the quarantine, and we talk about what parents can do, because radio is something that all the families have, at least based on the statistics from INSTA, from the last census that was done in Albania. So they can access it. How much do they listen? That is difficult to understand. We don't have the data, but these kind of talk shows, it's a 1 hour weekly talk shows that are broadcasted within these radio channels. And one other thing that I haven't written, but parents are doing by themselves, is they are collecting cell phones that are still smartphones, but they don't use anymore, and they are distributing among the children of in their kindergarten, and that is a way that they are also somehow getting in touch with other children, because one good thing that the ministry did was that they offered for free the bandwidth or broadband, but the word the internet access if the data they are checking is it has educational purposes. So that way they could have this kind of contact. And if we can go to the next page, please. Also, we have the issue of children with children. One way we did it is to collaborate with organizations that already are in the field and they are already very much strongly connected. So we provide know-how, and they are the ones who are distributing. They're distributing leaflets or techniques on how they can play with their children and yet learn at the same time, like when you're setting a table or when you are hanging the clothes to dry in the sun. You can play with colors and you can play with numbers and develop sets and talk about small and big and all that. And this is something that the families have truly appreciated. One other thing, again, this idea of the teachers being overwhelmed. We also have children with special needs in the schools who are not in the early childhood services, who are not receiving support. We created this hub that creates the connection between a future teacher, a student that will become a teacher, and they are connected with one child, and they offer suggestions to the parents on what to do when they are with their child and how to support their development. This is a way for the student to get direct practice, the student to understand their profession a bit better, the teacher to have direct access, because they know that they cannot keep on calling the teacher because the teacher has 25 other kids, but they can call this one person who is a student, and they are at home, they are bored, they want to do something, so this is a great opportunity for them to collaborate, and this way also the teachers are a bit released, and this is a way also to take care of the well-being of the teachers as well, so that they can encourage self-caring for the others, but also for themselves.
Many thanks, Gerda. I think that both examples are three actually, I may say. The radio shows that I think are so important for reaching out to a larger population than with the online tools, and the quality of these broadcastings, I think it's so important, and that's the place where educators, professionals should be involved in providing guidance. And I think it's wonderful to have had students, future educators involved in hands-on experience on working close with the children and families on an individual basis. I think for them it's the practicum that perhaps would have never happened to such intensity and frequency. And I think that's something that really has determined to happen and on helping not only the child and the family, but also the professionals too, and themselves as future educators. Simon, what has happened in Netherlands? I know that Rotterdam, some people might know that Rotterdam is a quite a diverse community in all senses, and there are quite some families that would need additional support, and that's something that is a reality not only now, but has been also before this period.
Yeah, definitely, Mihaela. And what you've seen is that actually as an organization, therefore we have also a couple of coordinators for extra care as a member of our staff, and we've not had that since recently, but since the last couple of years. And what they do is actually try and stay in contact with the families that we have identified as a little bit more vulnerable, just to see how we can support them as childcare organisation, but also how we can mediate between all different kinds of professionals that are set up to help these families, and how to have them more like coordinated care instead of just having the parents have to shop for the care all different places. So that's actually what these coordinators of extra care do. What we've adapted their way of working for this specific crisis. What we've actually said is that instead of the carers, the educators that contact parents, is that we have these coordinators contact each parent of a family that is more vulnerable every week. And this is something that the educators do for all the other children. So all parents are being called once a week to ask, how is it going with the child? How are you doing? How are you holding up? Can we do anything specific that for you in support? But for these specific families, it's really important that we just stay in touch, not just check up on, but stay in touch and see what help has to be organized and how fast we have to do that. We've also created the possibility that not only children from parents that have the crucial, important professions to attend childcare, but also that's more locally for the municipality arranged childcare for children in very vulnerable families. So that's actually something that we've built upon our experience that we already had, and we've extended it actually.
Thank you, Simon. And now, Sanya, because we know that in your magazine there has been also an article, and there is focus also on the families that have children with special needs. I think this is perhaps also very, very challenging aspect. We were saying that parents cannot become overnight teachers or educators, even less perhaps therapists. I mean, there might some of them that have learned a lot along the way, but I think that it's pretty overwhelming while dealing with so many other challenges, contemporary challenges, to really ensure that the child is benefiting of the same type of support that it has happened before, and that puts a lot of pressure on parents. I'm pretty sure that educators have tried to see what additionally could be done for these families. And I saw that in your magazine, this is one of the issues that has been addressed by the educators.
Yeah, this is actually the example of one educational rehabilitator. Her name is Renata Kubelka, and she wrote about her work. So what they did in their kindergarten is that actually they adopted individual educational plans for children with special needs, in a way that actually they suggested to the parents how to adapt that plan for the home environment, and not to teach children, not to provide them additional activities, but actually to adapt some home activities like doing ordinary things at your home in a way in which you can support the development of each child. But what I would like also to mention is those children who are actually living in poor situation, what Gerda mentioned. And one thing which family lost is free meal for their children in kindergarten. And right now, what's happening actually is that kindergartens and local authorities, they are rebudgeting their budgets, because the budget for food, of course, it's not spent. But what is the question? Is that money are going to be spent for that children or not? Because now actually they lost what we actually planned already for them. And we are worried that it will not be rebudgeted on their side, and they stay at home and not have enough money maybe to provide everything what they would like to provide for their children. Yeah.
I think that the whole issue of supporting the most vulnerable children and family is extremely complex, and also is perhaps the most urgent one to be addressed. I mean, we've discussed a lot about what educators and families are doing using the online tools, but there is a reality that is more painful than this one. What gaps are and what needs to be in place for those that actually are learning how to function in the online environment, but they are the ones that are totally disconnected from this world, and that's the place where the educator alone cannot do that much, can do some, but it obviously needs a broader network of professionals to work together, and also there needs to be on the levels of governments much more implication in finding solutions, which are also of financial nature, not only of emotional or development support. It's something that is beyond of what an educator can definitely provide, and I think that's something that needs to be highlighted. Because to a certain extent, I know for sure that for many educators, it's very painful to see that they cannot do anything for some of the families, and that is beyond their role. And playing as advocates, not just them, but others also that do know about the situation, and all these other professional figures that we have talked about. I mean, including students. I mean, being part of this experience also shows how important the role of those that are supporting children with special needs, in this case, as you were mentioning, Gerda, to see how all of them are actually part of a larger system and also of a network of support that needs to function more cohesively and more coordinated, especially for the most vulnerable. As I was mentioning, we will have a separate webinar dedicated to this topic, and now we thought it would be appropriate to mention that there is a lot that the educators are doing, but also that there is as much as they can do for certain vulnerable families. We're going to get to almost the final part of our webinar, and there are two questions that we have to still answer. I mean, we have heard a lot about the experience in all three countries, and we are quite certain that there are so many others that could be brought into the learning of everybody about ways that educators have acted and they are continuing to perform their roles. I think that what we need to reflect a lot at this moment is like, where are also some kind of dangers and big risks in the way things in this kind of disorganized way, or trying to reorganize ourselves, have tried to cope with. And I would start with this question, and then we would refer on that part, what is to be preserved, what will be so precious for tomorrow. And I would invite any of you to start sharing some of your thoughts on this one, Gerda. And maybe we can move to the next slide.
Sure. What is very important in this period is all this uncertainty and loss that happen all of a sudden, not to become a major blocking road for the future. What we keep on stressing is that if the child is hurt and traumatized and suffers from trauma, it's going to be very difficult for them to be ready to learn in the future. So it's much more important to focus on the well-being of the teachers and of the parents and of the child, rather than just focus on giving concepts on pre-mathematics and pre-reading skills. These are, we can catch up on that time, but we cannot catch up if the child is hurt and traumatized. And I believe we are going to face a global situation of post-traumatic stress in the whole world. This idea of the need to, with the screen time, we have been advocating for the children not to be exposed to screen, and then all of a sudden all they see is the screen because they have to. It's a task, and it's so confusing what kind of messages we're giving. One idea that I thought was very cute was one of kindergarten that started a challenge, and it's becoming viral. A no screen time, a no screen day challenge. The child for 24 hours should not look at the screen the whole day, and this is becoming like the thing on Fridays. And of course, it's very difficult, but it's important to keep in mind that children life will continue, will go on naturally with our social interactions. But if we have overdone it in one way, it's going to be extremely difficult to go back to normal. And this idea of losing the forest for the trees, there is an expression in English, but this idea of missing the big picture because we're looking at the single details, that's very difficult. It's very easy to do, and it's something that we need to keep in mind to help a projection of the future, of the near future, where, for the children to be ready to thrive as they were previously.
Thank you, Gerda. Let's see, who would like Simon? Sanya? Who would? Yes, Sanya. Sorry, Simon, go ahead.
Our names are quite alike, the first letter anyway. Yeah, what I've see is there is now an increased awareness about what's really important for children. And I mentioned the social interaction before, and I would hate for this this more conscious regard of what's important in our pedagogical approach, the social interaction between children, their availability for their well-being to flourish and their involvement to ignite development. I would hate for it to see us fall back in the rat race world where we fall back in our own old routines that actually don't let us focus enough on what the focus we've just found. So that's one major point I would like to take into account, that what I regard as a risk actually. The second thing is physical distancing. Please do not confuse that with social distancing. We shouldn't use the term anymore. This is the last time I've used it ever, and it's physical distancing, and that can help contain a virus, but it cannot. We don't want it to contain social behavior.
Thank you, Simon. I think we will make a promise. We're going to. I mean, I've not used it for quite a long time, but I think it is so important. I think kind of drives perhaps our mind and to really misunderstand what actually is happening. So we're so close more than we have been. Sanya, what are your thoughts? What are the big dangers? What are the big risks? What do we should really safeguard in this period?
Yes, I have one term on my mind. It is like balance. To really have a balance between what was old and what is old and what is now new, between what we learned now and maybe in what we are in love now, like in Zoom and so on, but also to be critical about new knowledges we got in this kind of experience, and to remember what was really good in the previous times, you know, and also balance between our fear and scare about going on now in kindergartens, in school, and continue in new conditions, and between the situation, and we can say, okay, we can do it in a different way. So I think what is in front of us is a lot of thinking, and how actually we can do things not in a new way, not in an old way, but in a balanced way. Yeah. And because of that, I think that there's opportunities for talking and for reflecting that kind of situation will be very important for educators.
Yes, and I think that since you're already kind of starting the balancing, it brings us to kind of a smooth transition to the next question. So because it is a deep reflective moment for each of us working in this field, not only about the dangers, because we know we could be conservative, but I think it's more if we are loyal to the child's development and child's learning, and we know, the richness of the child in these years, I'm sure that we will want to safeguard a lot of things, and we do see the dangers. But I think this reflection should also encourage us that lots of good things are happening today also. And which ones should we keep? Which ones should be really precious in our work tomorrow, with the same, let's say, sense of balance that you were mentioning, Sanya. And I think it would be very, now, especially that the centers will open, I think, and it's also very important that it's not just an economical measure, an economical rationale for which this is happening. We're clear that that's the driving, perhaps, reason. But I think that a lot of discussions and consultations should happen with parents, with professionals, with unions, with everybody that is involved in the field. But the main denominator of this thinking should be what impact will have on the child's development. And that's something that I'm not hearing a lot. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong to do it, but how to do it. I think it's a matter that should be very much discussed, so that's the main reason for which we are opening the centers. So coming back, what we should preserve from what is happening today, what we think that will still be precious tomorrow, what would you consider? And we can
one thing that is very clear that is happening is that parents are appreciating the role of the early childhood educator much more than in previous time. It's like we're talking about another era. It's really like that. It was very common for a parent to come and pick up their child and ask, did he eat, did he sleep, is he tired, is he hungry? And now they see that they are learning so much and they're doing so much, and this is such a hard job to do. And I believe that this is something that we need to keep, and we need to stress and celebrate the importance of the early childhood educators and the importance of the professionalism. It's not just fun and games. It's through fun and games that we do so much. And there are so many layers. So yeah, I agree with Sanya that the parents won't be educators, but they are understanding the subtleties of the profession, that there is purpose and there is rationale and all the games and all the activities. And it's not just passing the time, and it's not just caregiving, is much more than that. And that is something that I really hope that we will manage to maintain.
And it's very complex, not only multi-layer, but also it's so complex.
Very true.
Yes. Simon, yes, go ahead.
I agree with you that it is complex, and on the other hand, we can make it simple as well. Because if I look at our educators, I could correct the characteristic is more like hands-on mentality. But what I love from this situation, strange enough, is that they have had to take a step back and reflect upon their actions and what their actions actually mean for the development and well-being of children and parents and for themselves. And what I would really love is for this more enhanced reflective attitude. That's a specific, that's mentioned in the slide, is I would love to embrace that and to try and be really consciously aware of how we can use this new insight and tap into this new knowledge that educators have actually been really reflected upon. What is their approach and what are we going to do when the children actually come back? So I would love to have that, to grasp that. And that is not hard. It is actually just talking about it, reflect upon it, and facilitating them in time to actually be able to start thinking about this when it's hectic, when the children are all back as well. So that's something for the management to actually take care of, I think.
Sorry, we've been talking for so long, about the reflective practitioner, and it was perhaps something that many systems were trying to create as a pathway for developing the skills, such kind of competence. I think that now, as we were saying, it's a forced paradigm shift. Well, we wanted some of the things, but now it's like it really happens, and it happens naturally. And I think perhaps not even being aware that much, and how we can raise the awareness or have the awareness of what is really happening with the natural pathways created also for developing certain competences.
And I would like to add that my last point, Mihaela, is that there was an unexpected paradigm shift. Let's create a new paradigm shift. If you look at the Netherlands context, childcare is always viewed upon as something that everybody can do. You don't need an education to look after a child. Just be able to, the way the parents bring them in, give them back the same way. No physical harm. If you just try and really simplify what the educator's job is really looked upon is that way. Elections are coming on, so let's be quite pragmatic. Let's say, look how crucial childcare and early childcare education was in this crisis, the biggest crisis in the Second World War. That's what our Prime Minister talked about. And let's use that momentum to actually see what all our educators have been able to do in this really strange situation, and try to build upon that and solidify early childhood education as professionalism.
Thank you, Simon. Hopefully it will happen. Sanya, your ideas, your reflections on this. So what would you preserve? What will still be precious tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that maybe this is the situation in which educators saw that they are agents of change and agents of support in society, not just in terms of child development and children development, but really that their competencies are very valuable in families, in the society, that actually they can invent something which is very precious for all of us. And I hope that they will still going on to react and to act, not just in the buildings of kindergarten, but also outside of those buildings. Yeah.
I think yes, we have to capitalize on all these feelings of empowerment and all of the connections that have been created naturally. All of the networks that have been created, informal networks, I think they should become perhaps formal networks, because that's what the families do need. And we were talking so much about integrated system. I think this is the time when such kind of integrated services are provided, because the urgency was so high, and there was no way that one person or one professional could have done it, but rather in strong connection with the others. The same place that we are talking about the role of educators, but also how important the services themselves were, because parents understand that they can, as we were saying at the beginning, homes cannot be kindergartens, and they should not be, actually. And that shows how important were the kindergartens for children, and how much they miss their friends, and how much they also educators are missing the children. It's a strong connection, a strong relationship, but it's also a rich relationship that you have with your peers, with your friends, with the other adults, and not just educators. There are other professionals in the kindergarten too that I'm pretty sure children are missing. That's something that cannot be replaced, and that's something that we need to be very cautious about when reopening the kindergartens, when children will want to run into each other's arms, and they will want to feel the hand of the friend next to them, and they would want to play together. How this will be possible in the new conditions of service provision. We are very close to the end of the webinar. Unfortunately, we've been a few minutes later than we would have anticipated. We still perhaps will have time for one or two questions, let's see. And I would like to ask my colleague, Zorica Trikic, Senior Program Manager in ISA, to see if she could share such questions. I hope that there have been such ones. I've not have had time to really follow them, but I suppose that there were some or comments.
Hi.
Zorica?
Hi to everybody. Thank you so much. But my list, you answered almost to all the questions. So I will just pick two. One is And Simon, you started to unwrap these stories. What are we going to do? How we are going to use these lessons learned to protect the jobs of early childhood educators, because in many countries, due to the decreasing number of children and parents losing jobs, early childhood educators are under threat. And question number 2 is, you are also early childhood educators in some way. So what did you learn? What did you learn about yourselves and the work you're doing? And that's my question. I'm using this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, who would like to? Yes, Gerda, thank you.
Right. I learned that I can learn a lot. It's very exciting, and there are a wealth of opportunities there, and there are many things that we can use when we are in the face-to-face mode, like the opportunities that the platforms offer for documenting children's work, and it's so easy and so simple to do, and it does not take much of the teacher's time which can be used for other things, other important things. This is not something that teachers would do. They just wanted physical portfolios, but now they're seeing that it's doable, and it's producing lots of opportunities for shared reflection, for peer reflection, for the child looking at their tasks and their jobs, and the parents sharing these portfolios. So they just refused to do it previously. Now they're doing it because they have to. And I hope this is one of the things that can be used in the future. You know, if technology can make our life easier, why not use it? And this capacity of continuing to learn and continue to explore new opportunities that are out there, that otherwise in our daily routine that as Simon said, the rat race, we're so busy running, we forget to take the time and actually start to learn something new. And that's what I'm taking with me.
Thank you, Gerda.
But how we are going to protect early childhood educators? What can we do together? Simon wants to say.
Yeah, I'll try to answer 2 questions. One, if it's possible, I would like to answer your question as well, because what I really take with me from this experience of having being able to do this webinar together with you is that everybody's trying to figure out the same thing a little bit by themselves, and it's in small in my organization, within our country, and this within Europe. So what I really take with me is what I would like to do is certain questions that are more global than national. I would like to address them earlier on together with knowledgeable colleagues like yourselves. That would really be really useful, I think.
Thank you.
Sanja, the last but not the least.
What I learned. Everybody keep telling us that we will learn a lot, and this is a great situation for us.
Oh,
and
I don't believe in that.
I think for me it was wrong. It is not nice situation for me. I hardly wait to hug people, and maybe is what I actually need. And those who knows me, they know that I'm not touchy person, but I would like to hug most of people I know. And actually I learned how interactions are important. And I think it was obviously immediately. And what I learned is that the principles of quality are always the same. It doesn't matter, are you going offline or online? You should always keep on your mind what is actually quality. And I think that we should go and talk actually about the principle, go on and talk about principles of quality. What I didn't learn is that, everybody was talking that we will have time for ourselves. And in my case, and I think also it is the same for all educators and teachers, we didn't have time for ourselves. We are very busy. And maybe also we should think about why that happened, that we actually stayed at home and that we have so much to do. And maybe it is too much. Maybe we can also think about ourselves that sometimes we can, take a deep breath, and it is also fine, and it is okay to stay a little bit and to sit down and to think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for this. For sharing this thought. I think perhaps is that we share the same huge responsibility that we have. That we feel like we need to give an answer yesterday, not today. It's like we have this pressure of doing things now because tomorrow it will be too late. So I think, and it's something that is very common for the early childhood field. Having this strong responsibility towards children, because that's why we chose to work in this field. We really, really, really love the beauty of childhood and how important it is for their future. So I think this is something that gives us a sense of urge, which I totally agree with you, that it can also lead to burnout at a certain point and not necessarily taking the time to make the right decisions, or to give us enough time to still reflect on what we have learned as a first step, at a second step, at a third step. I think that there are going to be so many stages of reflection in this period and in the next period. And I think these kind of discussions, and I thank you so much for this wonderful discussion that we had together. I think these kind of discussions are very useful for ourselves also as professionals that contributing to the field. We need to have this kind of dialogues across countries and learn from each other and build our reflections together, because we are the ones that are also influencing the field, together with the parents, together with the educators, and together with all the others that are playing an important role, each of them in the big, big puzzle of the early childhood system. I thank you so much, and thank you everybody. We are apologizing for being 5 minutes late, but we are definitely looking forward to meet you again to our next webinar that we will organize very soon. Please continue the discussion if possible. Let us know your opinions, and we will definitely make sure that they reach out to Sanya, Gerda, and Simon. Thank you so much to all three of you.